Welcome to Hearts Entwined Tales. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments and keep up with our latest spicy stories. I had just written a letter to my husband, my thoughts spilling onto the paper, only to tear it up into tiny pieces moments later. It wasn't out of anger. No, it was because I no longer needed him to validate my existence. At 40, I often felt like a quiet, invisible presence in my own home, like a shadow drifting in the corners of a place where my husband had stopped seeing me. And my child was preparing to leave. I had convinced myself that this was how things were meant to be. But then my son Jack surprised me. He took me to a cabin in the middle of a snowy forest, far from the chaos of daily life. In that bone-chilling cold, something shifted within me. For the first time in a long while, I felt alive again, through laughter, through the simple joy of being with my son. We fell into the snow together, and there was a single photograph, just one, capturing the moment. And in that instant, I remembered, oh, I'm still me. Have you ever spent so much of your life giving to others that you forgot who you were, who you really are? If so, then maybe, just maybe, my awakening began in much the same way as yours. I had never expected to step into a cozy wooden cabin, nestled in the middle of a snow-covered pine forest, especially not with my son. Sometimes, though, the things we least plan for end up being the moments that change us. Jack had just turned 21 last month, taller than me now, with those soft, observant eyes of his, always noticing everything. When he asked, "Mom, do you want to go somewhere for a few days?" I froze. I hadn't realized it at the time, but I think my son saw the emptiness in my eyes. The lonely dinners I ate, always alone, as Daniel, his father, was always off on business. And the way I still scrubbed the counters at night, clinging to a routine that had long stopped having meaning. "There's a cabin by a lake," Jack said, his voice soft. "The one I went camping to with my class. It's quiet. It's beautiful, and just like that, our journey began. Set plans, no rigid schedules, just a mother and her son climbing a mountain of memories. As we turned onto a road, my heart began to soften. Pine trees lined the way, their branches heavy with white snow, and the world around us was quiet, save for the soft whispers of the wind. Then there it was, the cabin, small, weathered, yet warm, like an old, comforting memory. Jack pushed the door open and smiled. It was just as it had been before, but somehow different, full of nostalgia. Inside there was an old fireplace, wool-covered armchairs, and a faded oak dining table. I stood there for a moment, surrounded by the warmth of old memories. It had been 15 years since I had been in a space that was truly mine, free from gas, stoves, washing machines, and Daniel's endless business calls. This was my moment. My space. As evening arrived, snow began to fall again, soft and steady. Jack lit a fire, and I sank into the rug, taking off my wool scarf, watching the flames dance. It felt like rewinding time, back to something simpler, something more pure. "Are you hungry?" I asked, breaking the silence. Jack nodded. "It's even instant. Noodles are fine as long as you eat with me." His words caught me off guard, and for a moment I nearly cried. I had forgotten what it was like to share a meal without rushing, without being just someone's backdrop. In that cabin, we ate together in quiet companionship. The silence was warm, richer than any birthday party I had ever thrown. Later that night, I lay in a small wooden bed, wrapped in a thick down blanket. The wind teased the tin roof, the soft crackling of firewood filled the room, and I could hear the steady breathing of my son, who had pulled me out of the cold emptiness I had been drowning in. "Maybe this is just a trip to escape the cold," I whispered to myself. "Maybe this is where I start living again." The next morning, I woke to the faint scent of coffee drifting through the crack of the wooden door. Morning light filtered through the linen curtains, as gentle as a second blanket. I slipped on a wool sweater and walked into the kitchen. There stood Jack, coffee cup in hand, staring out the window at the snow-covered landscape. "You're up!" Early, I said softly, not wanting to break the stillness. He turned and smiled, his voice carrying the warmth of the moment. This place makes me want to hold on to every moment. And I make great coffee. Want to try some? Sat down in a rocking chair near the fireplace, and Jack handed me the cup. Its warmth seeped through my hands, comforting me in a way I hadn't felt in years. We didn't speak much after that. The only sounds were the gentle crackle of the fire, the crunching of snow outside, and the soft, steady rhythm of my breathing as I tried to learn how to be still once more. We spent the entire morning tidying. Up the cabin not because it needed to be done, but because it gave us something to do together. Jack wiped down the windows while I folded blankets and put away old things into the wooden cupboard. Every small task felt like it was stitching us back together, mending a connection that had been frayed by time and distance. It had been so long since it was just the two of us, no phones, no emails, no petty distractions. By noon, the snow had lightened and the sky had cleared. Jack pulled me outside, his face bright with excitement. Have you ever gone snow hiking? Mom, I laughed, shaking my head, a little shy. I'm more used to walking through markets, I said, glancing at the bulky snowshoes he handed me. But today you're walking through the woods with me. And so we stepped out into the snow, our feet gently sinking into its soft, pristine surface. The forest around us was still, quiet, only the sound of our breaths and the occasional rustle of the branches above. I hadn't expected to feel such peace from something so simple as walking. Jack's hand rested lightly on my shoulder as he began telling me about his past camping trips with friends. His voice, usually dry and curt, was now warm, filled with enthusiasm. As we paused in a clearing, Jack looked at me thoughtfully. When I was little, every time you had a headache or seemed upset, you'd always go out to the backyard. I don't think you knew, but I noticed. Did you, Mom? I turned away, blinking rapidly to hold back the tears. I hadn't expected him to remember or to understand so deeply. I thought you were too young, I said softly. Jack shook his head, his eyes full of wisdom. I saw. And I always wished you had someone to lean on so you didn't have to keep holding it all together. In that moment, I didn't just see Jack as my son. I saw a young man full of understanding, maturity, and compassion. The weight of his words washed over me, and for the first time in years, I felt truly seen. Later, as we sat on the porch, my cheeks pink from the cold, Jack handed me a cup of hot ginger tea. Where do you want to go tomorrow, Mom? He asked. I shook my head, watching the snow continue to fall silently. No, I whispered. I think I'd like to stay here a few more days. I wanted to stretch out this feeling, this rare moment of peace and connection, this feeling that after so many years of being a wife and mother, I was finally remembering how to be myself again, without the need to be perfect, without the weight of expectation. That night, the house felt different. Daniel still hadn't come home, and as I stood in the kitchen drying the last plate from the leftover birthday dishes, I hung the towel on its hook and realized how much I had changed. The house, so familiar, felt distant now. Every object from the reading lamp with the broken hinge to the faded wedding photo slightly askew on the wall felt like a part of my old life. But now I wasn't sure if I was living in it or just going through the motions of a role I had been playing. I sighed and sank into the couch, pulling a blanket over my legs. I couldn't stop thinking about everything that had happened. And just then, I heard the light footsteps of Jack coming down the stairs. He appeared in the doorway, holding a glass of water. Can't sleep? I asked. Not really, he said, sitting beside me. We sat in silence for a few moments, and then Jack spoke again. Did today feel a little different? I smiled faintly, feeling the weight of everything that had shifted in the past few days. Maybe it's my age, I said softly. When you reach a certain point, you start to think more about what you've lost. You haven't lost anything, Jack said, his voice filled with reassurance. And in that moment, I realized that maybe, just maybe, I hadn't lost anything at all. and something in his made me turn and look him in thighs. "You're the one holding everything, Taga. Without you, I think this family would have fallen apart a long time." A gloomy heart tightened. Jack's words were a gentle but painful reminder. Had I really kept everything to Gore, or was I just pretending not to see the cracks? Daniel hesitate, your father. Do you feel like as slipping away Jack was silent for a long moment, then its word, I think he's already gone a long time ago, closed. My eyes not out of shock, but because it had never been spoken aloud before, and now my own son had confirmed it. But you're still here, Jack continued, and so am I, still have each other. I turned toward me, son, grateful for his words. Jack's presence felt comforting and supportive in that moment. I didn't see him as the small child I once carried, but as a grown man, a man with a heart big enough. See they pain, even my husband no longer noticed. I didn't say anything. We sat there a togger in silence, listening to the ticking of the clock as if time itself was giving me a pause to reflect, to breathe, and to understand that even if Daniel had forgotten who I was, still seen by my own son Ina, how long I had been sitting. After Jock went back to Hess' room, maybe a few notes, maybe an hour. But when I finally listed up the usual haze, and weariness suddenly lifted as if someone had pulled a heavy curtain off my mind, I walked into the bathroom, turned on the light, and looked straight into the mirror. Theist, staring back. ATM was no longer youthful woman in the old wedding photo that I'd known for a long time. That night, for the first time in years, it really saw myself. Not already, not Daniel's wife, not Jack's mum. It's just a woman slowly losing herself in the quad of days when no one asked how she was, in the dullness, off-wordless meals, in kind of silent sacrifice, so constant that even she had forgotten it was by and made. I braced both hands on the sink and exhaled sharply. A slight chill ran down Miss Panay. Wasn't pain, it was clarity. I remembered the early days of being a wife, a mother. I once had dreams opening a small bakery, writing a book, learning a fickly language, but bit by bit I had folded all of it into family. Dinner. Sin to Jack's good behavior, into Daniel's work schedule. Had it lived for everyone else and forgotten this one truth? If a woman no longer lives for herself, Shetty, even if she's still present in every family photos, a tear rolled down him cheek. But this time, it wasn't a tear off self-pity. It was a tear off a canning. She no longer wanted to be the invisible part of this house. I didn't want a baby woman. Daniel was merely grateful for her patience. I didn't want to be Thea. Jack looked at with quiet sadness. He watched her fade into Zolan's. Wanted to find my voice again. I wanted to choose a day filled with music curiosity. Something that made me no reason at all. I wasn't sure what I would do. But one thing I knew, tomorrow would be different. Looked at myself in the mirror one more time. The dark circles under my eyes were stealthier, but there was a glimmer of something, almost pride. I didn't need Tobe, younger, prettier, or praised by a noun. I just needed to live true to hot. I really felt that night. I lay down and closed my eyes, not with anxiety or regret, but with a fresh, powerful sense of calm, as if I had just come through a storm and was standing in the first light of dawn. I had just started Totus off when the phone rang, sharp and coldest, if pulling me back to earth from a dream left unfinished. I glanced at that clock. Music. 208. I jolted downright, my heart pounding. Jack, me son's name, was the first thing puff flashed through my mind instinctively as Samathar. I grabbed the phone, my voice trembling. Hello. On the other end was a deep, urgent male voice. Are you Daniel's wife? I froze. Yes. What's going on? Where are calling from the Central Hospital? Your husband Daniel collapsed while working late. He's currently being treated in the cardiology emergency in no. Can you come right away? Stood there stunned and could only say I'm on me way. I drove through the night, my hands gripping besting wheel tightly. The streets were a deserted amber street. light stretching out like tingled lines of memory in mim questions spun wildly. Is Daniel okay? Had there been any signs? Why didn't he notice? But what surprised me most was the feeling in my chest. I wasn't afraid of losing Daniel. That's why I was unsettled because him. I hadn't been said something unfinished, even though I thought I had let it go. I arrived at the hospital and rushed into waiting area. My eyes fixed on thick closed doors of the emergency room. A few minutes later, a young doctor stepped out and removed his mask. He's out of danger. No, luckily you got them here in time. It nodded in thanks, but my heart still walled and slowed down when I was allowed in. Daniel was lying there pale, exhausted face I had known as cold and distendo. Strange livable. I stood still for a long time. Before sitting down beside him, "Kay," Daniel opened his eyes and looked at me. There was nothing dramatic about it, just a tired and honest gaze. He whispered, "I'm sorry for everything." I didn't know what to say in that moment. All Finger, the emptiness, the disappointment Ty had held into, seemed to scatter Daniel, the husband. I thought had sappered into his work was here at his most fragile end. I, the woman who had just begun to remember who she was, suddenly faced with the question I've truly hazed. What will I do that night sitting by the hospital bed? I didn't sleep, but I no longer felt the ergotorin. I wasn't sure what would happen with Daniel, with me, with Jack, but I know one thing, every journey of awakening has passed through interruption because it's sudden. Those moments that we truly understand where we want to go a week after. Daniel was discharged from the hospital. The house became strange liquidity, no more slamming doors, Ina Rusher, midnight phone calls. Daniel started working from home. The doctor said haunted complete rest for at least 3 weeks. He accepted it and reluctantly asked for me. I didn't know what to do with the space that now existed between us. Got up early as usual. Matica feeder. But now Daniel also sat there in the spot where only an empty chair is to remain. We exchanged bulletins, a few health questions. Then once again fill at the kitchen thought afternoon when Jack went out to meet his friends. I stepped into Daniel's temporary office. He was staring out through a window as if something out there might save him from things left unsaid. I spoke first. "Wait, we need to." He turned it around. Ice-tiered, but not avoiding mean. I sat down in the chair across from him. Neither of us said anything for a long while. Then I asked, "Did you ever realize how lonely I've been?" Hen looked at me this time for longer, then nodded. "Yes, but I didn't know what to do with it. Work waste, only thing I felt I was still good at." I gave a dry laugh. "What about me? What about Jack? What about all Fedners I waited for alone?" And he didn't respond. He only looked down at hands as if he could find the answer there. "Ich know you're angry," Daniel said slowly. "But I was afraid that if Istapot I'd have to face the truth. That am no longer the man you once chose." My chest tightened in all the years. Well, together. Daniel had never let any crack show in his armor until now. It took a deep breath, then said, "I don't need Simone. Perfect. I just need Simona truly present." Daniel looked up for the time in many years. His eyes were amnesty. "I thought I had lost you, Daniel, but you know what the scariest part was?" He had already lost myself before that in debt. This conversation didn't end with any resolution, but it was an honest beckoning. No grand gestures, no promises, didn't embrace and cry. Didn't try to write our old love story, but for the first time in a long while, we saw each other not through roles, not through Asian, but through real ice thinning as I stood by the kitchen window. Jack came home. I turned to look at M, still the boy I once knew, but growing with each passing hour, and ich knew perhaps this healing journey wasn't just for me and Daniel, but like for an entire family, one that once thought it was already broken. Jack didn't ask anything when he saw Daniel in Messaginget. The dinner table that evening, his gaze swept over us, a mix of Sarah's and Koshin. As if you were looking into a familiar room where all the furniture had been rearranged the hair and leaves floor. I handed him a bowl of soup, my hands lightly trembling. Daniel quietly spooned rice into his own bowl, No one said much, but something felt different. A kind of quiet that no longer weighed heavy, but felt like the opening bar's OA song just beginning its prelude after dinner was cleaned up. Jack went upstairs. He sighed, thinking he probably need time. But less than 15 minutes later, ass-off knock came at my bedroom door. "Marie, you busy?" Turned around. Jack stood at threshold. No phone, no arboods, just me. Boy, now grown tall with something gun-spoken in his eyes. It shook my head. "Come in, sweetheart. Sit down in a chair," and for a moment, then he spoke. "Sophie," as if afraid to shatter something, "forgive you. And Dad, you're okay again." You? The question stunned me. He wanted to answer right away, but I paused it in his eyes. It's curiosity. I saw concern, a quiet hope for clarity, but also a fear of buying hurt. "I'm not sure," I answered honestly, "but I think we're starting to talk again like real people." Jack nodded, then looked down absent-mindedly, tugging at a loose thread on the sleeve of his shooty ink. I grew up in a house where people caked a lot, but never really said anything real. My throat tightened and some erdums. It felt like I was standing back, two strangers trying to keep everything from falling apart. I walked over and sat next to him. I placed my hand gently over his. "You don't have to do that, Jack. No child should. Ever carry that burden?" Jack looked up, eyes red-ned. "But if not me, then who?" My heart chattered into pieces. Titch. I pulled him into a tight hug. The first real 09, a very long time. And in that embrace, I realized it's something I'd never considered before. It was just Daniel and I who had been worn down Bisolents. Jack was a victim, too, of all the empty spaces we had left behind. All the room sat alone or restless. Perhaps the journey toward Heisbegen, with the marriage it begins, with courage, too. Face the we've left on the ones we love most. A week after the conversation with Jack, the first snow off season began to fall gently over Thebacure. I stood by the window watching snowflakes drift down quietly, like time-like things long past. No noise, no brilliance, just quiet presence. Danny walked over holding 2 mugs of hot cocoa. One for him, one for me. We wouldn't say anything, but our eyes no longer avoided each other. Something had changed, not quite forgiveness, but recognition. "I'm trying," Daniel said, softer. Genuinely, not to go back to how things were, but to learn how to be the partner you deserve. I took the mug from him, my hand brushing his. The warmth didn't make me soft. It made me clear. I didn't respond. I didn't need to rush. Neither of us did. Far off, Jack washed over snow from the walkway bung. A thick coat and a hood pulled over his ears. Oh, but I saw him smile when a snowflake landed on his nose and tilted his head to the ski, receiving it like a joke from nature. I stepped outside and called, "Careful out there, or you'll catch a cold." Jack turned back and called out, "It's okay, Mom. The snow's thin. It's warm." And I stood there for a moment reflecting on what he just said. Beneath in snow, the ground is warm. Mabate's essence of this family. Even after the cold, even under layers of solence, anger, or hurt, there's still Soylanderneth, still a place. To take Rudo begging again. That evening, the 3 of us sat together at the dinner table. No grim plans, no big celebration, just pasta and toasted bread. A few scattered streets and soft laughter, but I felt more at peace than he had in a long time. I don't know what tomorrow will bring. Maybe Daniel and I will never be what aunts were. Maybe Jack will leave for school and start his own life. But I know this. We had that courage to look at each other, to look at the truth, and chose not to look away on Tommy. That is enough to call it a new beginnings. Am I the scariest thing, isn't what we've done, but when we no longer recognize ourselves in the mirror? The author in this story did I just endure pain. She hit the deepest point of loneliness, and from there, Cher learned how to love herself. Genuine Dan unconditionally always holds an exted turns men's. When we feel like we've lost a very thing, but we're brave enough to honest with our emotions, to face our mistakes and choose what is right, Titus, what true growth looks like, whose maturity doesn't come from never falling, but from learning how to rise again with a heart that still believes. Let this tree remind us awakening sometimes begins with a crack. Emotional healing is a solid military journey, but it is not meaningless in love.